Executive Vice President Kim Holmes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Heritage Foundation. It's a real privilege and honor to have all of you here with us today. And on behalf of the Heritage Foundation, we are honored to host President-elect Bukele of El Salvador for his first public event in Washington, D.C. We are delighted to share this moment with so many Salvadorans and so many friends of El Salvador in both the audience here and also online. El Salvador is a country of immense importance to the United States. It is a longtime ally. It's a longtime trade partner. America and El Salvador have enjoyed over a century of diplomatic relations, and we are richer for the contributions of the Salvadoran diaspora. The election of Nayib Bukele represents several milestones for El Salvador. He is the youngest president in El Salvador's history. He is also the first third-party candidate to hold office since the end of El Salvador's civil war. On February 3rd, he was elected with 53% of the vote, which was avoiding a need for a runoff. As the mayor of the capital city of San Salvador, President-elect pioneered various successful violence prevention programs. He revived public spaces throughout the city, and he provided youth with sports and cultural programs. His administration also instituted a zero-tolerance policy for corruption. As president-elect, he can now take his anti-corruption agenda nationwide, and we look forward to hearing more about his plans. El Salvador is in the midst of an insecurity and economic crisis. It has the misfortune of being caught in between South America, the top drug-producing region in the world, and the United States, which is one of the top drug consumers. Violent street gangs and transnational criminal organizations have destabilized the Central American region. This insecurity has stifled economic growth, and a decade of status economic policies has worsened El Salvador's economic health. According to the Heritage Foundation's Index of Economic Freedom, El Salvador's economic freedom score has declined during the previous tenure of the government that preceded the current one, from 69.8 in 2009 to 61.8 in 2019. And this government's legacy leaves a legacy of anemic economic growth, weak government effectiveness, and a large surge in violence, homicides, and drug trafficking. Now, we commend the President-elect's support for Venezuela's Juan Guaido, and under the President-elect Bukele's leadership, El Salvador will no longer be an active supporter of Maduro's criminal dictatorship. Now, judging by the large social media following and the presence in this room, the President-elect needs no or very little introduction. On June 1st, he will be sworn in to office as El Salvador's next president. And we are looking forward to the next 5 years of his administration. So please join me in welcoming to the stage President-elect Bukele.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, this is my first public speech since we won the elections in February 3rd. And some people back home said, why did you choose the Heritage Foundation to make your first public speech? And I would say the things that the president of the Heritage Foundation just told me. This is the most influential think tank in the world right now. And El Salvador needs the support of the most influential think tank in the world. So that's why we're here. And Since we always say that in February 3rd, El Salvador turned the page in the post-war era. And that's something some people say, how do you eat that? I mean, what does that mean? Everybody knows El Salvador had a war, a civil war. A 12-year-old civil war started in the 80s. It ended up in January 16, 1992, with the sign of the peace accords. But actually, we ended the war formally, but we never ended the war really. After the peace accords, the two sides of the war, one represented by Arena, and the other one represented by the former guerrilla, which then became a party, the FMLN, they continued to run the country for 27 years. They still run the country. Right now, we have in government, we have the former guerrilla in government. They will continue to rule the country till January 1st. So the real thing is that the international community forgot about El Salvador and said, okay, El Salvador signed their peace accords, they're fine now, let's go somewhere else where they need us. But the fact was that El Salvador was still living in the post-war. And everything that affected us in the war, all of the discussions that became into what we know of as a civil war are still there. The two sides, the same old discussions, the same old ideological divides. So the country needed to move forward. And one step to move forward was to end up this two-side regime, which is the same two sides that fought our civil war. So in February 3rd, El Salvador decided decisively to turn the page of the post-war era. We won by, not by double digits, but by double digits. It's more than 20 points from the second place. We won in the 14 departments of El Salvador. We won in the 14 cabeceras, which is like the 14 capitals of the states here. We won in 14 of them. Out of the 60 main cities, we won in 59. We won in all groups. We won in women, men, young, old, rural, urban, rich, poor. We even won the kids election. Really? By 61%. It's not official, but it gives you a thermometer of the future. And we won the international vote. Salvadorans voted for us 80%. 80% of Salvadorans that voted, living abroad, voted for us. And we won to all of the other parties combined. If you add up all of the other parties, they will stay way shorter than what we achieved on February 3rd. But the reality is that we got a big win. But at the same time, there's still a lot of power in the two sides that made the Civil War. They still control the National Assembly. They still control many of the institutions that make our government work. And that's the way a democracy works. But at the same time, this is one of the challenges we'll have to face if we want to move the country forward and we want to really turn the page of the post-war era. Now, there's something very important, and that's why we're here. El Salvador's relationship with the United States has eroded in the last 10 years. By matters of ideology or by matters of lack of pragmatism, we just forgot that we have a third of our population in the United States, that we use the US currency as our own currency, that 80% of our exports come to the United States, and that 80% of our imports come from the United States. So we weren't making the right decisions. Now we want to make the right decisions, and we want to improve our relationship with the United States as best as we can. How? Someone would say. And actually, we have so much in common. We want the same things that most Americans want. We think 90% alike of what American thinks. And if you see, we endure things like free enterprise, limited government. We like freedom of speech. We like democracy. Actually, if it wasn't a democracy, we wouldn't be here. And it was because of a great international observancy of the elections that we didn't have a widespread fraud that would have prevented us from winning. So now the challenges that we face can be solved with the same recipe that were solved here in the United States. I've always said that Washington is my favorite city in the United States. And it's not because it's the most beautiful or the one with less traffic, but just because of the fact of the vision when it was built. When Washington was built, the U.S. was a poor country. And they built this huge, beautiful city as their capital. So they will impress foreign dignitaries. The wisdom of doing that is not by doing that itself, but by the vision of what they wanted to achieve. Probably in 50 years, probably in 100 years, but they were sure they will be a world power someday. When we go back, probably it wasn't a popular decision, but when we look back, we will see it was the correct decision. And right now, the United States is the most powerful country in the world. So it was a vision that turned into reality. Now, our vision is not to be a superpower. We're too small. But our vision is to have opportunities, is to have security, is to disappear poverty, is to be an example for other third world countries that things can be better when you unite and you use common sense to build a policy. So we want to look towards the future. And like I say to some government officials we have been having meetings with, we just had a meeting with the president of Mexico. When they ask us, what do you need? We can send you aid. How much aid do you need? Or are you expecting us to increase our aid? And I said, no, we're not expecting you to increase your aid. If you actually want to end it, we're fine with it. We don't want to be aid. We don't want to be aided. We want to do business with you. If the U.S. will buy 1% of the coffee it consumes, we will not be able to grow so much coffee for that demand. If the United States will buy 1% of its sugar to us, we will not be able to produce so much sugar. So the reality is that the U.S. can send us $1 billion in aid, but that won't make a real difference. But if the United States starts doing business with us, that will really make a real difference that is solid and that will create real jobs. Now, Salvadorans are very, very hard-working people. And of course, any president of any country could come here and say the same thing, right? But this is true. Salvadorans are very, very hard-working people. So when we speak about immigration, for example,